Today, we are not going to tell the story of the Israel-Palestine conflict in the way you are used to. Not through religion, and not through classic political narratives. Instead, we will look at this conflict from a different perspective, through three different thoughts and three different ambitions that confronted each other on the same land. One wanted to rule this land. One wanted to establish a new state on this land. And one wanted to continue the life that already existed there. And the conflict began exactly at this point. Today, most people who want to understand this conflict start with maps. They show you how the colors changed, how the borders shifted, how one side grew while the other shrank. But maps do not tell you one thing. Maps only show the result, not the cause. Because a conflict does not begin the moment land is lost. It begins the moment the idea of what the land is changes. And most of the time, this change is invisible. It progresses slowly and settles in silently. By the time it is noticed, it is already too late. This is exactly what happened in Palestine. At the end of the century, Palestine was a small piece of land, but it simultaneously entered into three different systems. Each had a different need, and each tried to meet that need with a different tool. In the beginning, this was not a problem because the systems did not touch each other. But history does not allow parallel lines to remain parallel forever. They intersect at some point, and that moment of intersection is the moment the conflict begins. Britain did not need Palestine. Britain needed India. In 1869, the Suez Canal was opened. The travel time from London to Bombay was cut in half. From that moment on, the Eastern Mediterranean became an existential line for Britain. Palestine was on this line. It had no other significance. Therefore, Britain did not want to establish a permanent order in the region. A permanent order would make Britain unnecessary. The optimal situation was this: forces that balanced each other but could not defeat each other, and Britain in the middle. In 1915, they promised independence to the Arabs. In 1916, they shared the same land with France. In 1917, they promised a national home to the Jews. 3 promises. The same land, 2 years. This was not a contradiction. It was a method of producing control. Zionists came to Palestine in search of a homeland, but the foundation of this search was security. And security was reflected on the land in a very specific way. The more land, the more permanent the security. To meet this need, they had a ready-made set of tools: modern law, institutional organization, and international diplomacy. They didn't just learn these, they grew up within them and carried this system directly to Palestine. They turned the Ottoman land registry system into an opportunity. They bought the land, registered it, and certified it. From a legal perspective, everything was valid. The Jewish National Fund bought land, the General Federation of Labor built an economic structure, and the Haganah built a security capacity. When the state was declared, there was nothing left to establish. It had already been established. Land was never an end in itself, but the concern for security transformed into land, and this transformation produced its own logic. Security is not a threshold that can be satisfied. Once it begins, it is a constantly expanding need. For Palestinians, land was not a legal category. It was a physical reality. Approximately 600,000 people, mostly peasants. The land operated within a communal use arrangement. There were no borders. Who planted what? Who harvested what? That was how it was recognized, not by whose name it was registered to. This order functioned under Ottoman administration, but when the empire withdrew, this way of life was left defenseless. Because in the new era, what mattered were not habits, but documents. And in a system operating through documents, the place of those without documents was uncertain. Palestinian political organization emerged much later, in the 1920s. But at that point, they were not facing a society, but an institutionalized structure. They were late because the world they lived in had changed, but they had remained outside the system that determined the rules of that world. These three systems existed for a long time without touching each other, on the same land but in different realities. Then, the land began to change hands, and for the first time, this question arose. Who is the owner of a land? The one who buys it, or the one who lives on it? Modern law gave a clear answer to this question, but to accept that answer, one first had to accept this assumption, that it was the only valid system. And not everyone accepted this. This is exactly where the conflict began. This story is often told as a struggle where one side wins and the other loses. But this narrative is incomplete, because here, not only did people confront each other, but systems confronted each other. A world that lives the land versus a world that turns the land into property. And these two worlds do not operate with the same rules. In one, legitimacy comes from living on it. In the other, it comes from possessing it. This is why the conflict became inevitable. Because the issue was no longer who is right. The issue was which system will prevail. And the answer to this question was given not on the field, but in the rules. The result was born not from the intentions of the actors, but from which system became the rule. The other only noticed the rules of the game later. This is why this conflict did not explode all of a sudden. It was built step by step, and after a certain point, it became unstoppable. What we see today is not a beginning, but the delayed result of decisions made a long time ago.